Now that we know where the offense came from and where it was headed, let's examine when this offense occurred. To do that, look at the start time. It depicts the moment when the first event associated with the offense was detected.
And where can I see the end time?
Actually, there is no end time, because at any given moment, a new event can be added to the offense, provided the offense is still active. So the end time would change every time an event is processed.
I see.
Instead, another property you can check is the duration of the offense. This field shows the time elapsed since the first event was processed by QRadar.
And I suppose that is helpful when determining the impact of an offense.
Yes, it gives you an idea about which offenses are newer, so you and your team can prioritize them accordingly. Now that we know when the offense occurred, we need to figure out how this happened. Looking again at the categories, they can also give us insight into how an offense came to be. For example, an offense related to an exploit describes an activity that behaves differently than one described by an offense related to an application activity.
Okay.
Another important detail is the number of events involved in an offense. By navigating to the list of events, you can see all the associated events for the offense, and their details. Open the details of an event by double-clicking it and examine the event description. This is a clear detail of what is happening with the particular event and thus with the offense you are investigating. It is the most fundamental aspect you and your team want to inspect for a specific event, along with its payload. The payload information attribute contains the original syslog message from which the event collector created the event. It varies depending on the nature of the event, the protocol, application, and many more variables. Click here to wrap the text of the payload. The payload can provide deep insight into the offense and can quickly help your team to determine how serious an offense actually is.
You're right. By reading the description, I can understand more clearly what is going on. Can there be multiple events with different payloads in a single offense?
Absolutely.
But what is making this event trigger the rules engine? Or why is this event part of the offense?
Remember the rule associated with the offense?
The one we looked at in the rule wizard?
Yes. What was it called?
I think it was local DNS scanner.
Let's see if we can find it in the details of this event. When you scroll down, you can find the rules that have fired, or partially fired, for this event.
So by examining these rules we can find out why the event is part of the offense?
Yes, that is correct. To answer your previous question, here's the rule we examined. This means that this event received from your checkpoint firewall returned positive for all the tests conducted by this rule, thus creating, in conjunction with all the other events that also tested positive, the offense we are currently investigating.
Oh, I get it. This event triggered this rule, and when this rule fired, QRadar created our offense. But what about all the other rules I'm seeing here? Why weren't they shown in the offense earlier?
Because they are not part of that offense. Remember that QRadar first receives events from log sources, and then the tests from each rule determine the creation of an offense. So an event can test positive for more than one rule, which can lead us to think that these other rules may have created other offenses also containing this event.
So, if I repeat this same analysis with all the other offenses reported by the console, it is very likely that some of them will point me to this very same event?
Exactly. You got it. Going back to the list of events, you can also examine the number of events associated with the offense to gain an overview of how big or complex this offense is. By the way, you can view the total number of events of the offense here in the bottom left corner. Let me show you one more thing here. By applying a filter in the list of events window, we can determine if events of the same nature are being generated by different sources. We right-click on the source IP that we want to exclude from the results and select Filter on Source IP is not and the IP address we want to filter out.
It says that no results were returned, so what does that mean?
What do you think?
Well, I think it means that this offense was triggered by only one source.
Very good. And that is because our offense is indexed on source IP.
Which naturally means that the offense will only contain a single source IP. Then it makes perfect sense that there is only one source IP address. You already explained this fact by looking at the source IP when figuring out who triggered the offense. I remember now.
You got it. But if we were to see different sources after filtering our initial source, we would have to include those sources as part of our investigation.
Yes, for offenses indexed by other type, that makes sense.
Let's close the events list and display the source IP addresses for the offense. By double-clicking an individual source IP address, you can view the list of offenses associated to this source. This is useful to better understand how the source in an offense is impacting your network. Why would you think this is very important for you and your team?
I can imagine that it helps us to realize a broader scope of a potentially malicious source, and if that source is involved in other offenses.
Correct. In this list you can immediately see whether the source contributed to a bigger risk, or if it is involved in an isolated suspicious activity only.
Great.
I think that all this has been good information to understand how this offense came to be, don't you think?
I do. However, I would like to investigate why this offense occurred.
Okay, let's figure it out by looking at the annotations. These annotations describe why the rules have been triggering the offense. You can find out why an offense considers events to be threatening and why some automatic decisions were made. Let's examine our example more closely. After sorting annotations by date, by clicking twice here, an analyst should always begin to look at the first annotation